Hey guys, it's Kevin, my review for Charlie Says. And what Charlie Says is essentially about is we center on these group of girls who were formerly followers of Charles Manson. They're now in jail, and basically we get to see what landed them there, why they stood with Charles Manson and things like that, and basically get to see if they are aware of their wrongdoings and all that stuff. So, Charlie Says, as you guys know, yesterday I reviewed a movie called The Haunting of Sharon Tate. It's part of this, I guess, series of inferior Charles Manson 2019 films leading up to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. This is the other film that I'm going to be reviewing, Charlie Says. This one I really was not looking forward to either. I thought it looked really cheap. I really did not like where it was headed. It seemed like it was going to be just not a very well done film. I really did not hear too much about it. Look, I will say right now, this film is not as bad as the one I reviewed last night, but it's still not a very good movie. Charlie Says has a lot of problems for sure. It definitely does some things right, but I don't think it is as good as it could have been, and we're just getting to right now, starting off with the cast. And honestly, that's one of the things that does bring this film down for me. For the most part, I don't really think the acting is all that great. There are two really good performances, though. The first one is from Hannah Murray, who is kind of our main character here. She did a very good job, I think. She's someone who, she starts off very innocent, and eventually she is recruited into Manson's followers, and I think she did a lot to elevate this role overall. I definitely really did like where she went with her acting. There were definitely some really great moments, particularly one towards the end that I thought was definitely very well done. I've always really liked Hannah Murray as an actress, and I do feel like she definitely gets a few moments to shine here. She definitely does elevate what she can, and for me was for sure one of the bright spots of the film. But easily, the best performance of this entire film was actually the one I was the most worried about, and that is of Matt Smith as Charles Manson. Now, look, I will say this. Is he the ideal, actor to play Charles Manson? No, but I do think he does enough to make this role work. You see how inviting Manson was. The Manson in this film, he's sort of a failed musician in that way, and, he's using that as a way to recruit people, and I think he overall does a good job with that. You see how charming he came off and things like that, and how easily he wasn't able to manipulate people, and I think Smith did a very good job with that. And then when he needs to get a bit more menacing, it's not as convincing, I will say that, but I still think Smith did what he could with this role. Again, I don't think he was perfectly casted or anything, but it was definitely better than I expected. I thought he was going to be very awkward and just very unconvincing, but for the most part, I actually do think he did a pretty good job here. As far as the rest of the cast, I really did not think they were all that great. Sosie Bacon, I'm just not a fan of as an actress. I don't really think she's very good at all, and she's not very good here. None of the girls, to be honest, besides Hannah Murray, I thought were really all that great. A lot of them just seemed like they were just kind of thrown into here. They seemed kind of bored. They didn't really seem like they were as into it, and no one really stuck out to me besides her. Merritt Wever, I usually really like, but here, I didn't really like her all that much. She seemed like she herself was not really all that into it. I didn't really like her that much in this movie. Annabeth Gish, I didn't think was very good here either. Chace Crawford, I thought was fine. I mean, really just the majority of the cast, besides those two performances, there's just not a lot to talk about. They don't really bring a lot to the table here, unfortunately. Now let's get to the directing and the writing, and this is really when things fall apart. Now, the director of this movie is actually the director of American Psycho, Mary Harron, who is one of those directors that, she made a great movie, and ever since then, she just has not really done much. I know she did that Alias Grace show on Netflix, which, of what I saw, I really liked. I just never got around to finishing that one. I don't really think it acquired that much of an audience. But unfortunately here, her directing, it just isn't really there. I wouldn't say that it's bad. Like, she definitely does have a very serious tone, and the film does a good job with that, but it doesn't feel serious enough. It doesn't feel like there's enough of a style. The film needed a more dynamic director, I think, to really elevate its concept, because this is a story that we've seen tons of times. There's been plenty of stories about Charles Manson and his followers, and this film just does not do much stylistically to make it stand out, make it feel different, and I think that really does hold it back for sure. So her directing here, I just didn't think was very good, but easily the biggest problem with this movie is the writing. Now, not completely. I will say this, the Charles Manson side of things, the film does a very good job with. It characterizes Charles Manson as, like I said, this failed musician who is manipulating all of these various women. He gets them wrapped around his finger, he, seduces them and things like that, makes them feel really comfortable, and then eventually he wants to, commit the helter-skelter and things like that, and you see that he feels that he is a god in that way. Like, he feels he is, cleansing the universe in that way. Like, what he's doing is a good thing. And the film does a really good job with getting us to understand Manson's rationale. It doesn't all try to glorify what he did or try to, make him a hero in a sense. It definitely makes him a villain. It is clearly on that side, but I think they did a good job at characterizing him, and that part of the film is really good. The rest of the characters, though, just aren't really there. Specifically, the three girls. I mean, again, Hannah Murray does a really good job acting-wise, but character-wise, there's nothing to these girls. I mean, very early on, they just kind of, like, find themselves in this position. We don't really see what led them up to finding Charles Manson. We don't really see who they were before this, who they are outside of being just Charles Manson's followers. So because of that, it makes it very hard to connect to them as characters. So and you would think that us being in the prison, and when Merritt Wever's character is interviewing them, that would maybe make them more interesting, but that's actually the most boring part of the entire film. In fact, I feel like that entire section of the film could be cut out. It doesn't really do anything except for them slowly realizing that they are, that they have been tricked, that they've been manipulated, they've been brainwashed by Manson. But it takes them a long time to figure them out. So you have this long stretch where they're being interviewed and they feel that it's a good thing what they're doing, and that, Charlie is a good guy and things like that, and it just takes them a long time to realize it. So again, that portion of the film doesn't really do anything. And I will say, when Charles Manson is on screen, the film gets infinitely more interesting. There were definitely things they dive into a little bit. Like I said, the manipulation, the way that he would seduce them and things like that. That stuff is definitely very interesting for sure, but it never feels as dived into solely because we don't know who these people are. And in a sense, I can understand why they decided to do that, because clearly they were trying to go with the idea that they were Charlie's property in that sense. Like, he felt that they were his. I mean, there's literally a scene where Hannah Murray's character calls her parents and says that she is disowning them, like, she's never coming back, and it's really horrific stuff for sure, but we don't know anything about her, so we don't really care. Like, while it should be a very effective scene, we don't know her parents, we don't know the connection she has there, so other than the fact that these are her parents, we don't really feel all that much, and so it really brings the film down because of it. And again, these actresses, minus Hannah Murray, are not doing much to elevate these characters. So after a while, it just becomes kind of boring. After the, fourth or fifth scene of just Charles Manson manipulating them or making them do all these things, I mean, he has these women strip constantly, so there's more spectacle going on and things like that. I mean, there's a lot of fucked up stuff that he's doing, but you never really care because you don't feel attached to these people as characters. And I know they were real people, but you could have at least given them something, anything for me to latch onto, but there really isn't that much there, and so it really does kind of bring the film down, I have to say. And like I said, the interviewing part is easily the most boring part of the entire film. I mean, there really is not much they do there. They also try to shoehorn in this thing with Merritt Wever's character, but then they immediately backtrack on it, so you just kind of sit there like, what's even the point of her character? Like, why are we even diving that much into her if, like, they're not going to do anything there? It's just very confusing writing all around in that sense. I will say, though, the third act of this movie, that's when it did pick up a little bit for me. Once we get more into the helter-skelter and what Manson is trying to accomplish there, and we start to see the regrets that all of these girls have, and them realizing what they were actually subjected to, that's when the film gets a lot better. It happens way too late into the film to the point where it's ending, and I think it just didn't really work in that sense. So again, the writing, it just isn't very strong here. There definitely is some stuff that the film does right. It just doesn't do enough right, unfortunately. And so because that becomes boring. The cinematography also here is really good. I will definitely say that. They got the 60s time period down very well. When you are in the farm and things like that, you kind of feel like you're trapped there. It feels very inviting at first, but eventually it feels very claustrophobic, and I think they did a very good job with that for sure. And I like the way the film utilizes both the farm and the prison setting. I think that stuff is well done. The score is very good as well. There's actually quite a lot of music here. Because, as I said, in this iteration, Charles Manson is this failed musician, so we actually do get quite a lot of music, and Matt Smith is actually a really good singer, surprisingly. I did not know he could sing as well as he did, and that was actually some of my favorite parts of the movie. I like seeing that, and I definitely liked the score here for sure. And the editing, this film is way too long. There are many portions that just drag on and on. The first two acts especially are quite sluggish. The third act, like I said, it picks up a bit, but it definitely is too long. It could have easily been like maybe in like 90 minutes at most, because it really does drag. And I understand that they're trying that it's deliberately paced in the sense where this is supposed to be a slow process. Like, them being manipulated was very slow in that way, and how he would kind of ease them into it. I understand that, but it just takes way too long, and it was very hard to stay invested in. Also, this film has easily one of the most peculiar endings I've seen all year. You know how most biopics, like, the text comes on the screen and you think it's done? This movie has text come on the screen, and then it follows up with another scene. And the last scene of this movie, is very odd. It's very similar to what they tried to do with Haunting of Sharon Tate. It's not as disrespectful here, but it just is very strange. I don't really know what they were trying to do there. It's not a very effective ending at all, and I just don't really think it works all that well. So, like I said, Charlie Says, it's not a terrible movie. It doesn't have the strongest acting. The writing is definitely not very good at all. Matt Smith is very good as Charles Manson. Him and Hannah Murray do what they can to elevate the film. There are moments where it can get very shocking. There are moments where it definitely can get quite brutal for sure. Seeing how Charles manipulate all of them is definitely very fascinating to watch, but ultimately it just doesn't do enough. It's a film that I'm very quickly going to forget about, and I'm just excited to see what Tarantino is able to do, because I feel like he has a much better eye, and I feel like this film, it just needed a more dynamic presence to it that it just didn't have, and I feel like it just really soured the entire film for me. So overall, I am going to give Charlie Says a C-. So what were, guys, in my review of Charlie Says? Let me know what you guys saw this one overall, if your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.